Cool. If you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, I can kick off with intros and we can go from there. So thanks everyone for joining us. We've got Jonathan Sims from Now Insurance. He's the VP of Data and Analytics, and Andy Wallner, the product manager at Onehouse. Do you guys want to go ahead and do a quick intro and then we can move on into the rest of the content?
Yeah, Andy, you want to go?
Yeah, sounds good. I was muted there. Yeah, so I'm Andy, a product manager at Onehouse. I've been on the team a little under 2 years and have been working across a lot of our products here with the engineering team and the sales teams at Onehouse. Before Onehouse, I was at a startup building an AI-powered search engine for all your workplace tools. And before that, I was at Google working on some ads and MLOps products.
That's awesome, Andy. Thank you. Jonathan, do you want to share a little bit?
Yeah, so I've been with Now since almost early 2020 during the pandemic, during the early startup phase as a part-time consultant, and shifted into the full-time VP role earlier this year. And prior to that, I did a lot of consulting for a couple years for a lot of big enterprises doing data science and data engineering. And then prior to that, I was a data scientist in the consumer credit space, building like lending risk models and things like that.
That's awesome. With that, I'll let you guys just go ahead and dive into it, and I'll keep an eye out for questions along the way, but yes, take it away.
Alrighty, sounds good. Yeah, so I'll give a brief overview of what Now Insurance is and what kind of differentiates us. So we're an AI-enabled insurance platform, and we primarily do insurance for medical professionals. So think like physicians, nurses, nurse practitioners, individual home health aides, things like that. And we're actually expanding into physician groups and even entire facilities pretty soon here. So really what sets us apart is that, first of all, we have a no paperwork application option that most of our individual consumers like nurses and home health aides really get a lot of value out of. In this industry, it's actually quite common for people to need to do like handwritten applications and then scan them and email them in and things like that. Sometimes the turnaround can be weeks or even a month to get the quote back and get an insurance certificate that says you're covered to go practice somewhere. So we really change all that, and we make it possible to go from application and quoting to an insurance certificate in under 3 minutes in some cases. And really what allows us to do that is how we leverage not only existing data in the system, but also a lot of alternative data to do the underwriting and risk analysis in real time. And then we also use a lot of AI to enhance the efficiency of the underwriting and the application process. So in addition to not only the ease of use, but we're actually able to be more flexible in the coverage that we offer for modern healthcare professionals that might be practicing part-time or do like telehealth across states is increasingly a big trend. And so just other unique situations that individuals might be using to enhance their careers.
Yeah, it's really cool what you guys are doing and how you've leveraged data to be able to actually make a big difference for these healthcare providers. Could you share a bit more about some of the ML models that you guys are building?
Oh, yeah, sure. So the primary ones we're looking at right now is for risk prediction and then also classification. So we have super granular data down to the individual provider level and individual facilities, and we're using a lot of sources that sometimes aren't even looked at at a lot of competitors and other more traditional parts of the industry. And so we use all those. So building on top of like traditional actuarial methods for analyzing risk, we enhance that by using machine learning to look at a vast swath of over 15,000 data points sometimes for each risk that we're looking at. And then we also use it for classification, like figuring out maybe what type of practice someone actually has versus what their maybe degree was in, 10 years ago or something like that. So those are the two main ways that we're using machine learning. And then, like I said, with the AI part, that's a lot more with like the underwriting efficiency and application process streamlining.
That's cool. So it sounds like it's helping in multiple aspects of the business, both in the product that you provide and then optimizing those internal processes.
Yeah, especially on the ML side, we're able to get really fine-grained. Traditionally, especially with like medical malpractice, the quotes have been when you rate a person for risk, and figuring out what the price should be for the policy. It's done at kind of an aggregate level, like cardiologist in a certain county would get like kind of all the same premium, but we're actually able to differentiate and figure out different risks within those categories.
It's very cool.
So, good question. Thanks. So yeah, let's get into the data engineering stuff. I'm sure a lot of people on here are interested in. So our kind of journey begins, like I said, early 2020. So really early age startup. And from the get-go, I mean, we were already on AWS and our application was running on AWS. So made sense to go with the data lake approach, and the Lakehouse as like a name and architecture was kind of getting traction around that time. And Parquet was already pretty settled, for file formats. But the challenge was because we were adapting and pivoting and developing new features so fast, is the schema changes for all of our data were coming fast and often. And so we started out from the get-go using Airflow for all of our ETL and data pipelines and things like that, and then also using Glue and Athena for the actual query engine and compute on the data pipelines. But the schema changes were taking up a lot of engineering hours, just managing the updates and everything like that. So, dropping columns, adding columns, changing data types, stuff like that, was taking quite a bit of time. And then the second challenge was the kind of latency requirements. So we were originally using like Google Analytics, basic Google Analytics for site tracking and stuff, but we really needed to track the entire customer journey because in the insurance space, we have a lot of, to use a data engineering term, like late arriving facts coming in. So things might be kind of like a policy might be updated retroactively months later, but you still need to know what happened early in the customer lifecycle, like when they're on the website. So we developed first-party analytics internally to help us understand how our users were using the site and where they were finding challenges, in the forms and the portal and things like that. But we didn't have a very good way of refreshing that on the data lake in a timely manner. So it was like at best a couple hours and usually like a day or so for the updates. And then, like I said, with the data management, a lot of the cost was in just the engineering time as opposed to, compute and storage costs. That data engineering time was what we were really trying to optimize for.
Makes a ton of sense. I had a quick question on that slide as well.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, we see it in a lot of roles, like data engineers are so coveted and there's so many different things that you can do at the time. You mentioned frequent schema changes, late arriving data. I'm curious about some of the more specific activities that your data team was doing that were taking up a lot of time.
Yeah, so specifically it was updating Airflow DAG code to handle table changes and schemas that we didn't really know what the schema was, because a lot of the data that we were ingesting it was coming to us in CSV format from like government agencies or third parties, things like that. And at best, they would give us, like an Excel spreadsheet data dictionary that said like what the column types are and stuff. And we tried to use the glue crawlers, but they weren't really that consistent at figuring out the schema. And then on top of that, just keeping up with like all the column names, and sometimes, the government agency would like drop a column or rename it or something like that. So just updating that, and then so not only changing it at the present, but then trying to keep it consistent in the data lake, because we want the whole history of the table for training the machine learning models. So if you have a break in the column name, it's kind of tedious to go back. It's doable, but it's just tedious to go in and update the ETL code, and then you have that break, and then you have to make sure you account for that break in the consistency of that table. And then there were over like 500 tables, and our team was, at one point it was just me. So that was pretty time consuming.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. So it wasn't just the setting up of the lake and the lake house, but it was also that ongoing maintenance that was a burden on your team.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, so choosing the build route. So like I was saying, we already wanted to make sure we had the CSVs, especially the bigger ones, like converted into Parquet, because obviously for the query speed and things like that, since we had a lot of pretty large tables. And so looking at options, so this is like, we're in like late 2021 now at this point. So we were already using Apache Airflow for, like I said, for the ETL and everything like that, and then Superset for the BI and analytics. And aside from just liking open source, I also was seeing that it was really going to reduce like our vendor lock-in, because even if the company we chose to manage it, something happened there, we would still be able to manage it ourselves if we really needed to. And all of the data and formats and everything would be open. They wouldn't be locked into whichever like proprietary data warehouse we were using. And then there are other, lakehouse options that we were looking at, but a lot of them had like a pretty high upfront costs relative to the value that we get from it right away. So all of these kind of like managed open source options were really appealing to us. And so I've been looking at Apache Hudi at this time, like late 2021, like I was saying, and just comparing it to like Iceberg and Delta Lake. So in terms of the real-time kind of like streaming ingestion, it was pretty clear that Hudi was the best at that. Delta Lake had the similar capability, but then we kind of liked that Hudi had like a more diverse community in terms of like the committers and things like that, as opposed to Delta Lake being like formerly proprietary and kind of managed by Databricks in essence. So we kind of thought like maybe long term that would be a more like truly open source solution, have more kind of longevity. And so that was kind of the preference at that time. And I was looking at setting up the kind of CDC stack with Apache Hudi, which consists of like Debezium and Kafka and Spark or Hudi Delta Streamer. And I saw a couple templates that like AWS was putting out on here's how you set this up, and it looked like it was exactly what we needed. But I just didn't know those technologies, and just the initial setup was kind of a blocker for us at the time. So kind of put off doing that. And so that's late 2021, and then early 2022 is when I think I saw Vinod post about Onehouse. So that's how we came to find out about that. Yeah, so when we were looking at that, it was kind of funny because I was saying, I was already looking at setting up the stack, and then I think on one of the first posts, it was saying, we'll set this up for you in your AWS environment. So I was like, oh, sweet. Someone will do it for me. So I emailed, and apparently I was the first person to request a demo or something like that when they went live. So that was kind of cool. But
yeah, early days.
Yeah. So yeah, I feel really nicely into our stack because it already had just even from like day one, it already had integration with like the Glue data catalog and the S3 ingestion, and then Postgres CDC ingestion. So it was a perfect fit for us from the get-go. And also it was inside our own VPC. So that made it really nice too for, like control and governance and everything like that. So one thing or a few things that it offered, like in addition to setting up kind of the Hootie data lake or lakehouse ourselves, was a lot of the schema inference, like I was saying. We've had a lot of really good success with the um, using the Onehouse schema inference when we're loading all of those big CSVs in that I was talking about. So it really unlocked a lot of the tables that we weren't even really using because we hadn't gotten around to converting them into Parquet and defining the schemas yet. And like I was saying, the glue crawlers, it was just kind of very tedious and didn't always work. So that was kind of a big unlock for us at first. And then also with managing the actual kind of Hootie format and then like the underlying Parquet files, had all of the table services, that managed the Parquet file sizes. And obviously big thing with Hootie and some of the other open data lake formats is like the mutability of data lake tables. So that was another benefit that we got there. And then obviously the fact that it's self-managed, the cost of just the Onehouse pricing versus the cost of engineering time in running it, it was like no comparison. So that was a big deciding factor. And then finally with the data governance, obviously we don't have HIPAA data currently, but we could possibly in the future, but we definitely have, PII and things like that. So with the data governance, it's really nice because every single bit of information stays in our AWS VPC and in our managed S3 buckets, like in our accounts. So I think the only thing that goes out is some of the schemas because they go into the Onehouse UI. And it was really nice because even from the get-go, I asked if you guys could not show the table preview in the UI because then that would be like values from our data sets leaving the VPC. And you guys set that up for us so that it would just show the schema and the column types, but it wouldn't show any of the actual values. So that allowed us to really like make sure that our data is locked down while still getting all the benefits of a managed solution.
Definitely. Yeah, that flexibility is really nice when you have this kind of architecture, which I think you're going to cover today. You can choose to expose what you want in that control plane versus keeping data within your account. One thing I actually wanted to ask about, you mentioned data freshness, and I'm seeing like for anyone in the data engineering world, this is the ultimate buzzword right now is data streaming, data freshness. Could you talk a bit about how getting those tables in near real time with Hootie and Onehouse was able to actually help the business?
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of the benefit for the kind of real-time use case was in analyzing kind of like the consumer funnel for our customers, like how they were finding the site and how they were using the site. And like I said, we were doing things, like changing the form and stuff like that. And so wanted to see like if we made a change to a button or a form or something like that, would that affect the sort of conversion rates and stuff on the actual site. And so previously it would take, even though we were tracking it internally, just the nature of kind of the traditional batch ETL pipelines, it was, like I was saying, at best a couple hours, but usually more like a day or so. So, if you make a change to the site, you want to know right away if everyone's dropping off, like at that change that you made in the form. So that was really important, and that also unlocked like the combination of the freshness with also the history, because we could track all the history to see, like retroactively what happened, but then we could also make sure that any changes weren't actively disrupting it. So in terms of the kind of like near real time stuff, that was our primary business value from that.
Awesome. Yeah, being able to make those near real time insights is really cool. And I'm sure important because every visitor to your site matters, especially in those early days.
Yeah, and because our product is because insurance is fairly, high dollar amount. It's not like a super high volume, low price subscription. It's like you were saying, each person is a significant, the price per consumer, or I guess the revenue per customer is a lot higher than some other types of businesses. So yeah, like you were saying, each person matters.
Awesome.
Cool. Yeah, so this is just a high level overview just to give everyone a sense of kind of what I was just describing earlier with the integration. So we have the operational data that's in Postgres RDS on AWS, and that's where both like the first party analytics and then also obviously all of the normal application operational data type stuff that you normally have. And then the ML model training data, that's the most of that is like the big CSVs, like the hundreds of tables that I was talking about before from a bunch of different sources. And we don't only use that for machine learning. So we actually, it's not shown on here, but we actually do kind of like a reverse ETL thing as well, where like we'll ingest it into Onehouse, manage it there and everything, and then we'll actually write it back to another operational database for the application to use, because it's kind of like, it's kind of more of like an OLTP use case there for that. So we kind of do a reverse ETL back in there. So that's pretty cool.
So just to fully understand that use case, you just transform with Onehouse and maybe aggregate a new table and then bring that back to Postgres.
Yeah, so basically we get like the raw data in from externally, process it in Onehouse, do some like OLAP, like analytics type transformations, and then write that back into an operational Postgres database, because it needs to be, once they're aggregated, then becomes more of like an OLTP use case for the application.
Awesome. And what are the benefits of doing those kind of transformations on the Lakehouse as opposed to keeping it in the database?
So one of the big things is managing the history, because the application usually only cares about the most recent things, but sometimes it needs to know about historical kind of changes to the same table. And then another thing is like like it has to do a bunch of lookups, point lookups, or I guess like record level lookups, back and forth on the application side. So that's why you need like a traditional OLTP database for that. But then the actual like query time, it would be like super expensive to be doing a bunch of OLAP queries on the Postgres operational database. So we kind of take advantage of the strengths of like both.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, and then so it says query on Amazon Athena. So we're actually using Athena really heavily, not only for some of the ETL transformations, where SQL gets the job done on the transformation, but we actually have that hooked up to, I said we used a preset, which is managed Apache superset for like BI and analytics. So that's actually basically our data warehouse, and it performs really well because the Athena queries, like the Hootie tables, which is fast, and then preset basically just submits Athena queries because preset or superset basically converts every like chart into a SQL query, so it doesn't actually need to process a bunch of data in itself like Tableau or something like that. So it basically just passes through like the SQL queries to Athena, and then those query the Onehouse data lake. Obviously, if we needed more performance in the future, we could swap out Athena for something else, but it's been working really well so far. Cool. So just to give an overview of kind of a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about. So, the advantages, significant cost savings, especially in the data engineering time, and then also keeping those things up to date. The data freshness and low latency when needed. And that's going to just, become more important as we go and we start having real-time data sources outside of just the application database in the future. So that's kind of not only helping us now, but also future-proofing there. And then with the model training, one thing I didn't mention with doing the machine learning training is that it's really important to have effective like snapshots and time travel of all of those large CSV dumps that we get. And so we're really using Onehouse a lot there to manage like the partitions and to make sure that we have like the time travel and the partitions all managed properly, because a lot of the stuff we do, we need to see, what was someone's profile, or not really profile, but kind of what did their attributes look like, as of 5 years ago, because maybe sometimes medical malpractice claims can take like 3 or 4 years to close, and then sometimes there's like retroactive adjustments to get made to like what the claim value was and all this complicated stuff from like a data engineering standpoint. So being able to see kind of where the data was at each point in time is super important for all of the ML training that we're doing. And so it helps us a lot there managing, especially with like the partition management and the time travel. And then that kind of ties into like the complex data analysis. It's kind of similar. We need to see like if we wrote a policy 2 years ago, why did we make that decision? Because sometimes if you're not keeping track of it at that time, you lose some of that information just by, the table changing over time. And then future proofing. So, we like that, especially with Hootie and like the other data lake formats, they're being used at petabyte and even like exabyte scale. So, I mean, I don't know if we're going to get to exabyte anytime soon or if we need to, but it's good to know that we're not going to, the data's not going to get too large. So that's a nice reassurance that, we're not going to outgrow this technology. And then with the complexity, it's already helping. So we already know it works there. So that's the end of what I have.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, Jonathan. It was really cool to hear about all the use cases that you guys are doing and innovation in the insurance and healthcare space. I think it's cool to see like an intersection of two spaces like that, and especially two pretty highly regulated industries. So it's cool how you guys have been able to solve a lot of the challenges that come with it.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. All right. Now I have a few slides on Onehouse to share an overview of what we do. So Onehouse is the Universal Data Lakehouse, where you can store all of your data, prepare it for analytics and AI, and then serve it in any tools that your team uses. So if you could hit the next slide, Jonathan. Awesome. So I'm going to tell like a quick story about how Onehouse came about and this architecture overall. So the data lakehouse has been growing in popularity over the past few years. Originally, we had data lakes and we had data warehouses. Those moved to the cloud. And then we reached a point where a lot of organizations realized they wanted to get the benefits of both of these in one place without making too many copies of their data into different systems. Hootie was born at Uber several years ago. And since then, we've just seen the data lakehouse take off with new formats like Apache Iceberg and Delta Lake emerging, and tons of adoption across the industry. As you can see here, there's a rich community of participants to these open source data lakehouse projects, lots of committers, and that committership growing over time. And then if you see at the bottom, some case studies on how the data lakehouse model has been able to save companies up to 80% in those very expensive compute costs. And we see leading companies like Uber and Zoom even taking advantage of this. So on the next slide, I'll talk a bit more about the Onehouse product. So what Onehouse offers is a fully managed cloud service in your cloud account, your VPC, that offers this data lakehouse as a service. So we do everything that you need in order to get your data lakehouse up and running and ready for analytics. You see on the left side here, we offer ingestion from all the different sources that you'd want to bring into a data lakehouse, everything from data streams like Kafka databases that you want to replicate for analytics, and then cloud storage as well. We manage that ingestion and make it easy, taking care of all of the data engineering work that you would have to do around that, like setting up jobs, managing schema evolution. And in addition to automating a lot of those tasks that you'd have to do, we run continuous ingestion on some proprietary optimizations that make ingestion very fast and cost effective compared to some of the other solutions out there, or even compared to doing it yourself. We ingest that data, and then we also manage the tables for you. So when you build the tables in the data lakehouse, we'll run table services that continue to optimize those over time. So you get optimal write performance as well as read performance when you want to query those tables. And we'll continuously do things like cleaning up the old data and saving save points in case you need to go back in time when something goes wrong with, let's say, some data that's coming in. We also offer a managed transformation, so you get a full ETL platform. You can perform transformations while you're doing ingestion, or even create derived tables using an architecture where, say, you ingest some raw data and then you want to transform that all within the data lakehouse to create some specialized tables for different analytics use cases. You can do all of that with either no code, drag and drop, or full code within the Onehouse platform. And then we offer full interoperability across the Lakehouse ecosystem. Jonathan mentioned choosing the Apache Hudi project initially, but we reached a point in the ecosystem where it's beneficial to be able to take advantage of all of the different formats and the integrations that they have. So with Onehouse, now you can also write your data in Delta Lake and Iceberg so that you can really query it anywhere and keep still just one copy of the data in your storage. So we can connect to any data warehouse. If you have like data analytics needs and you want to just perform some BI queries, you can go bring Snowflake and query those Onehouse tables directly. You can bring Redshift, BigQuery, really any tool out there. You can bring query engines like Athena, which now Insurance is using. And then for other use cases, let's say you have some real-time use cases where you want to serve dashboards directly to your users. You can do that with real-time engines. You can bring even data engineering or data science tools all right on top of a single source of truth in your data lakehouse. Okay, next slide, please. So just to summarize what Onehouse offers, we offer fast, near real-time ingestion, and you can see some of the benefits that now Insurance has been able to get from this, being able to make faster decisions as soon as the data is ready. It's cost efficient. So Onehouse actually runs ingestion ETL pipelines up to 10 times cheaper than some of the alternatives out there by running on hyper-optimized compute and leveraging a lot of the best practices that we've seen from building data lakehouses at massive scale at some of the largest companies in the world. We make it easy. So a lot of those data engineering work that you'll need to do first to build the lakehouse and then to continue to manage and optimize that lakehouse is fully automated by Onehouse. And then, of course, it's universal. So the data lives in your account, it's future-proof, and you can bring any compute engine to that data. So as we see, compute engines are getting better, they're getting faster, and they're also getting specialized. You have like special compute engines that are great for machine learning. You have compute engines that are great for real-time queries, but maybe more expensive. And then query engines that are a bit cheaper and a bit slower, but they're great for some of the BI queries. So you can bring all of these to the data instead of having to bring the data to those compute engines. A bit more about our company. We're built by data leaders from across many of the leading companies, backed by some awesome VCs, and we've seen a lot of recognition. Jonathan mentioned Now Insurance being one of our early customers back in 2022, and it's been cool to see kind of that growth in customers and recognition in the industry since that point. All right, I think that wraps up my slides, and I'd love to open it up for any questions that folks have for Jonathan and myself.
Thanks, guys. That was awesome. I did see a couple questions come in, if you don't mind. We talked a little bit about obviously the web analytics and that, but I did see a question come in. What are some of the other sources that you're working with, Jonathan? Anything that you can share on that would be interesting for the audience to hear.
Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, I can't get too much into the specific, like data type points that we're collecting, but I think I posted in the Zoom chat if it went through. So a lot of the data is from government, both federal and state level. So part of the I think it was the Affordable Care Act in like 2008, 10-ish, was to kind of create like national data banks, basically, that kind of collect a lot of Medicare and Medicaid data and make different parts of it available to different types of insurance companies or regulators and things like that. So that's a big source. And then some other ones are more commercial third parties that we ingest from, and then also there's some state level agencies like offices of insurance in different states that we're able to collect data from for mostly for the machine learning training for like risk assessment and classification and things like that. But then also to help us streamline the process. If we can like autofill forms and stuff like that, so our customers don't have to manually go and look up stuff or spend time typing it in.
Awesome. You mentioned using preset Athena. Was that the plan out of the get-go to be able to leverage sort of the access to multiple query engines and things, or are there plans in the future to use other engines? What's that look like for
you? Yeah, so I wouldn't say it was like the hardline plan from the get-go. We were looking at different options. We were kind of already using Athena just because like I was saying, we started out kind of with the Lakehouse lake architecture in like early 2020. And so Athena made it really easy, and we never really hit once we started getting the data in Parquet and Hudi format, we never really hit any performance bottlenecks that were, an issue. And then when we were looking at superset or preset, once we saw that it had the capability to do the Athena connection, then it was kind of an easy choice at that point. But obviously, as our business grows and things like that, if we needed to get more kind of horsepower, there's other query engines and ways to scale that up.
Cool. Just one other question, Jonathan. You mentioned a couple of times that the Lakehouse decision was sort of out of the gate, and some of the benefits, like with the open data formats and that sort of thing. Have there been any surprising positives that you've seen that weren't necessarily expected going in?
Let's see. I think maybe like the kind of like ability to, I guess we didn't really know at the time if that was going to become widespread, like the open data lake architecture. So it was kind of like it was just cost effective and very scalable for us early on. So that was the main consideration. But we didn't really see or know for sure if it was going to become as popular as it did and become kind of the standard. Like things were going to start kind of revolving around the data lakehouse formats, and then especially like the interoperability. We didn't really know that that would become popularized too, like between the different lakehouse formats. So I think those were probably the two most pleasant surprises, that it was just kind of added to the value.
Cool, that's awesome to hear. And then one question for Andy I saw come in is, this sounds interesting. Where would you suggest I go to get started?
Yeah, so you can check out our website at onehouse.ai. We've got a cool resources page. So there's a lot to learn about the Lakehouse paradigm and what Onehouse does specifically. You can check out that resources page and see some of our past webinars. We also have a white paper that I helped write on the Universal Data Lakehouse. I think that's a really cool read because it explains the overall architecture and how that shift has been really helpful for a lot of the leading companies. So I think that's also a great place to start if you're just learning about the data lakehouse.
Cool. Well, I think that's a wrap. Unless there's anything else you guys want to share, we can go ahead and call it an end. Appreciate your time, Jonathan. Andy, thanks for leading as well. Yeah, thank you guys. Have a great rest of your day.
Alrighty, sounds good. Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks, Ryan.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.